Well, welcome to this virtual premiere and social impact campaign launch of the Emmy-nominated Long Line of Ladies. Did you hear that? Emmy-nominated. Awesome. As you feel joined, remember again, please feel free to shout out in our chat your location. Please post in social media that you are here. I'm Judge Victoria Pratt, and I am the executive director here at Odyssey Impact, which is a nonprofit organization that's leading the National Social Impact campaign for this film. I'd like to begin by doing the land acknowledgement, and Odyssey Impact acknowledges that the land politically designated as New York City to be the homeland of the Lenape, who were violently displaced due to European settler colonialism over the course of 400 years. The Lenape are a diasporic people, which includes 5 federally recognized tribes: the Delaware Nation, the Delaware Tribe of Indians, Stockbridge Munsee Community, Munsee Delaware Nation, and the Moravian of the Thames First Nation, and the 5 state-recognized Delaware Bay tribes in New Jersey and Delaware. That continues to live here in close connection with their land. We also acknowledge that the land politically designated as Humboldt and Siskiyou counties in northern western California and parts of southern Oregon along the Klamath and Salmon rivers are the ancestral unceded territories of the Karuk, the community represented in this film that we are celebrating today. Now, I'm going to encourage you to look up the area where you live and check the chat for our land acknowledgement link, where you can locate indigenous nations in North America and additional tools and resources so that you know where you live and how it's connected to indigenous lands. Now, you're going to see a poll pop up with a few quick questions. Please, please, please answer our questions. It's really important for the work that we do to measure the type of impact that we're having. So if you could please just take a few seconds to do this opening poll, we would really appreciate it. Again, thank you for joining us here today's screening and panel discussion. We are so honored to be together to celebrate the official Impact campaign premiere of the award-winning short film, Emmy-nominated Long Line of Ladies, co-directed by Academy Award-winning Rayka, Zehtabchi, and Shaandiin Tome of the Dene Nation. I got to give a little hand clap. This is what the young people do, because we are in the presence of what I guess they call now boss women, women who are really doing the thing. And it's really exciting to be here talking about women telling their stories and telling stories that are important for everyone. And so I'm really excited about the panel. I'm excited to be working with the co-directors as well. Long Line of Ladies was the 2022 winner of the My Justice Award that Odyssey created with the generous support of Paramount and its initiative, Content for Change Academy. The award is possible due to our partnership with the esteemed Doc NYC Film Festival. And it's a competitive award. Annually, we award about $10,000 in cash prizes and an Odyssey Impact-led 6-month national campaign to a short documentary with a special call to action and social justice theme. You will hear a little bit later about our the call to action for this particular film, but we will also be posting it in the chat. So please, please, please participate, click on the link, make a donation, share it as well. So I wanted us to keep that in mind, because the action is also important, as well as watching the film and participating in the panel. Long Line of Ladies won due to its significant steps towards understanding indigenous worldviews as well as rights, and for shining a much needed light on the urgency of women's equality for all, as we are living in tumultuous times it is important that this film is viewed, but again, that is shining a light on the importance of women's bodies, women's rights, and that we all participate in honoring those things. Today's conversation is going to focus on key themes that you'll see uplifted within the campaign as well as the film, including moontime and empowerment of indigenous women and girls, cultural reclamation, restoration, and the ongoing impacts of settler colonization and exploitation, ecocultural revitalization, and the role of men. Per Odyssey's commitment to accessibility, you should see a live transcript button below to access the closed captioning for this event. Today, you are joined by our wonderful ASL interpreters, Christina Munson and Lavender Signet from Pro Bono ASL. Thank you for being with us. Thank you so much for being here and making this accessible and available to others as well. Now, we are pleased to premiere the 22-minute documentary film, Long Line of Ladies.
Ty sent a snap to our whole group chat and was like, guess who started her period? I was like, wait, this means that I'm gonna have my flower dance this year.
Okay. My fingers. So you're blinded for what, 4 days, and then we remove your towel.
It's going to be right in the center.
And you're reborn as a woman.
When they ask us, well, what was your flower dance like? And then you're like, well, I didn't have one. And then it's like, well, why?
So just like everything we do, right? We put good thoughts into that food.
That dance floor is your world. Don't be afraid of anything that comes out there. We all got you.
So now you're coming in as a girl, and you're going to come out a woman. You know, that's what we do. We've perfected that process.
All right, Cindy, well, I love you. You're going to do great, okay?
Okay. Love you.
Okay, see you in the morning.
See you.
A virtual clap for the amazing film that I have seen like 3 times now and still have so many questions, still have so many emotions around the things that we see. We are here today to celebrate this amazing film, to raise awareness around the issues that you see in these films, and to really get people galvanized around action around some of these things. You know, it makes me think about what I missed out on. I didn't have a coming of age ceremony. I wonder if it's too late to go back. But the beauty of this film, you know, as I introduce the panelists, the incredible panelists, I do so from a place of gratitude. I am so grateful that the incredible directors have, and all of the women have, answered the call on their lives about putting these issues first and uplifting these issues and being in a space that people say women shouldn't be in, and telling stories that people would otherwise not tell. So I'm doing this again from such a place of gratitude, what it means when you meet or you see or you hear Rayka, Zehtabchi, Academy Award winning and the first Iranian woman to do so. Yes, we must celebrate that. What it means when you meet the other co-director, Shaandiin. And please come on and wave so people know who I'm talking about, so they can put a beautiful face to all this amazing work, who is, you know, always running because she's always working on the next project. So Shaandiin, Tome, thank you for your work as well. Pamela Pimm Tripp-Allen, when he talked about when he read the poem Long Line of Ladies and Won't Be the Last, all I could think about is you and being the mother to everyone. It wasn't just about your daughter. It's this constant, it's not about just my daughter, it's about everybody's daughter. So thank you for that. To Dr. Kucha Risley Baldy, thank you for being a keeper of the culture and making sure that it remains memorialized in the halls of academia as well. So I'm just really excited to be on this call talking about these really important issues with really important people around these. I'm going to jump in. We want this discussion to be as interactive as possible. So please add your comments, thoughts, and questions in the chat. We will see them and we can also respond to them. So thank you again. Now off to the panel. To Rayka and Shaandiin, can you please share with us what compelled you to tell this story? Why was it such an important story and film to be made and for people to see?
Yeah, well, I guess I became a part of this project when Rayka reached out to me and had already been kind of further along than I guess I originally, I guess like when you usually start these things, you like start from a small place and like kind of grow from there. And I think it's really cool that Rayka invited me along. And I think I have my own reasoning for why I wanted to be a part of it. And that was like mainly because I didn't see stuff like this when I was younger, and really feeling like that media could play a really crucial role to like how you can see a family be, how you can see a modern Native family be. And after meeting the Allen family, you just figure and see how much love and care is there for a young woman, and how much support is there from their community. And that's just like so exciting to me. And it's so exciting to see love in the modern day. And like there's so much focus on negativity and so much focus on kind of like what it means to be Native from like the detriments. And I feel like this story was like the complete opposite. It's like, how can you show love to continue our story and our lives? And I mean, just like being a part of this has been such an honor, and like being a part of the Allen's family story and their community story has just been so lovely, and has really changed my life, honestly.
And I'll just chime in about kind of the origin before Shaandiin came into the picture. It kind of the seed of the idea. It actually didn't have anything to do with a coming of age ceremony or anything like that. It started after Period End of Sentence, my first documentary, and working with the PAD Project, the nonprofit organization that is also behind this film. I think after we made Period End of Sentence, it was like remarkable to see the impact that film had, and the conversations that were sparked because of that film. It sort of in some way like started a movement where all over the world people were talking about menstruation. And I think the whole point of that film was really trying to eradicate the shame and stigma around menstruation, around that topic. So after coming away from that film and realizing what a big impact it had, there was sort of this desire on behalf of the PAD Project, the organization, and myself, like, how can we tell more period stories? But how can we kind of do the opposite? Instead of highlighting the shame and stigma, how can we really like spotlight and uplift a community that has always looked at menstruation in a totally different way? So there really is no shame or stigma attached to it. It's like, coming from a place of empowerment. It's beautiful. It's, and something that's been like a part of the culture. And so, we started realizing that there are a lot of different tribes across America, and also like in indigenous cultures all over the world that have either coming of age ceremonies or sort of like celebrations around menstruation. And then I connected with Pimm after reading her about her older daughter Ty's Ihuk ceremony. And that kind of, there was an interest on her part, and that kind of started this idea that this could actually be a film. But it was essential that there was an indigenous creator at the helm. And so I reached out to Shaandiin because we connected on a lot of different levels, and thus began our collaboration.
That's awesome. Shaandiin and Pimm, if you could take some time and describe Moontime to us.
Hello, everyone. I mean, moontime is just sort of a phrase that we use that's commonly used across Indian country for women's time when they're on their menstruation. And it really recognizes the connection to the cyclical sense of the world that we have, recognizes that there's things in the universe that pull us in directions. The moons control the tides. The moons are a part of our season change. It's how we keep track of time. And so our moon time is sort of the time that we're a part of that. It recognizes that we also are in kind of like a cyclical pattern, a monthly pattern as women. And so it's just one of the ways that's kind of referred to it. As I shared kind of the other day with folks too, it's kind of a word that I'm not sure actually the origin, Kutcha might know more, but it's a word that's kind of used across Indian country as one of those phrases that we all share, that we lean into with one another so that we understand that time. But it's just really about a connection to understanding that we're actually connected to nature, connected to the way the world works, that we're all on cycles,
I think Pimm described it perfectly. And when we were talking the other day, I think also it was just like reciprocating that, and like as like Diné people, we don't necessarily call it moontime, but I think like as Pimm said, like we understand it as that, like we understand like the connection that it brings, and the cyclical nature of like us as like humans alongside like nature itself. And I think it's just like a really great reminder for like the power that you carry as women too. Like it's not necessarily just that it's something that's like happening that's like bad. I feel like there's a lot of like power that's like carried with that. And as like Diné people, we like believe that like you are most powerful like when you have that connection. And so I feel like there's a lot of intersections between, I guess, like nature and like your body. And I feel like it's really good to like view your body like that, just because like you remember that like they're like, I don't know, you go and you watch a sunset, or you like see like a full moon or something, and it feels like something not otherworldly, but just something that feels like bigger than you. And I think it's like a really great reminder to like see yourself as that too. Like you're kind of a miracle in a way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a superhero. What a beautiful way to get rid of the pejoratives immediately. And the great thing is that you can change your language around it immediately. So it was so beautiful to kind of have that discussion, like, oh, I can change this language today, tomorrow, immediately, and change what people say about you when you are on your almost superhero time, because that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, we are superheroes because we go through this time and we continue to function at peak speed and performance. So thank you for that. That was another reason to be grateful. I'm going to take a second because there is a video from the executive director from Doc NYC, with whom we partner with for this competitive My Justice Film Award. So she wanted to bring greetings. So if we can take a second to watch that.
Hi there, I'm Rafaela Nehaus, and the Executive Director of Doc NYC, America's largest documentary festival, and we work in partnership with Odyssey Impact to offer the My Justice Film Award. It was my absolute pleasure last year to help announce Long Line of Ladies as the winner alongside Odyssey. This year's Doc NYC kicks off on November 8th. We're in New York City in person, or you can join us online. We hope to see you. And we're very much looking forward to see who the 2023 My Justice Film Award winner will be. Congratulations again to Long Line of Ladies, and best of luck with your Odyssey Impact campaign.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Back to our panelists, Rayka and Shaandiin. As the recipients of the My Justice Award, what did this award mean to you?
I guess I can start off. I think the best part about doing film for me is like getting back into the community and like kind of seeing like how like this I feel like film is often seen as like elite sometimes, and like for instance like we premiered at Sundance, and it's can be like very inaccessible sometimes to like the people that you want to like reach out or like want to like see the film. And so for myself and for us as a team, I think, and like for Ati, it was always like really important to get back to a place where it felt like we were reaching community members. We were reaching like young women, young indigenous women that were like kind of in this place of like not necessarily understanding what their role was. And so for us is just like a huge big step in like our campaign and in our showing of the film is like, how do we like get back to a place that really resonates like our belief in the film. And yeah, I mean, like I had never really heard of My Justice before, and like I think it's like really awesome that there is such a thing as like an impact campaign, and not many films get something like this to like have discussions around films. And I think it's a really cool thing to see that enacted for Long Line of Ladies.
Awesome.
Yeah, totally in agreement too. I mean, I think we weren't like totally aware of what it would entail, and then I think when we found out, we all got really excited because it felt like it was perfectly in line with everything that we were hoping for the film. Because a lot of times you make films, documentaries, and you hope the film goes far, but it can be really challenging to reach the right the people that you hope to reach. And so I think we were really fortunate to receive this award for that very reason. And the film is also was distributed by the New York Times OpDocs, and that was a fantastic opportunity because we were able to put the film online and also have it be accessible to all people, even if they didn't have like a subscription. So I think from the get-go, we've always wanted to like just have it be as accessible as possible.
Awesome. Pimm, what made you and your family want to share your story?
Well, not to go too deep into the history, but we've had a long history in this country of colonization and its impacts on tribal communities. Here in our region, we've had contact just over a little over 150 years, and it was a really brutal contact, and it was a really time when a lot of the things for us, went away or went in hiding. And so my family and others were involved in sort of a cultural revitalization or a renaissance in the late 60s, early 70s into the 80s. And so it was at that time I was kind of brought up during that time, and we didn't have this particular ceremony yet coming back for us. But it was because of those elders, because of my uncle that you saw in the film, who actually passed soon after the film was made, him and his generation and the elders before them, that really kind of created this foundation for us to kind of want to keep, not just do it as part of our culture, but like, how do we, one of my cousins in the film expressed as a life way, how does this become who we are in our everyday life? And so as we leaned into that as a group of people, we started talking about the ceremonies that went away and why they went away. And it was really important to kind of bring balance back to our community, to have this ceremony that was very centered on women. And so it was really just a kind of that effort to kind of want to create healing and health for our families, that we wanted to bring the ceremony back. And when we first brought it back, my older daughter, I was pregnant with her. And so we often say, that she has been really fortunate. She got to experience the ceremony in utero. She had her own ceremony. She's been at ceremony for her other family members. And just now we're coming into like a generation of young people who have lived with it their whole life. And so just the beauty of bringing that back. And then I think we wanted to make the film because we know the impact it had for us. And we think that other families, other tribes, other communities would be empowered by learning that they have these things in their past, in their history, and to bring them out front, to understand that things were taken away beyond our control. And that gives us a little more control of our life, control of our own choices in life. And, and it just is a really connecting thing. Like we said earlier, with moon time, it's something that, half the world's population is dealing with every month, across the whole globe, and yet we don't find those things that connect us too often. And so we really wanted this film to be universal in a way, so that people would find the human part of who they were. And I think that's what this ceremony does for young women. It ties them to something so much bigger than they are, and we hope to share that kind of opportunity with all young people, to find that connection to something that grounds them as being a human.
Thank you. Dr. Riesling Baldi, what resonated with you in this film that connects back to your own story that made you want to be involved in the Impact campaign? Can you share that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot with this film that resonates, especially with our local Indigenous youth here in this area, to see as people start to represent Native peoples, but also our next generations in ways that empowers them in the places that they come from. And seeing this story as told from an empowerment perspective. So instead of a focus on just the really kind of negative and awful things that happened as part of colonization, instead of a focus on kind of the loss of things of Indigenous peoples, this film really focuses on the empowerment of our next generation to be the voices that can make difference, make change, and that they can get that that strength and that resiliency from the places and their families, the peoples they come from, and the culture that they already have. And it was really empowering to see that you could tell a story like that, and that it could make a really big impact, and that it didn't have to just involve how a lot of people would treat us as sort of victims to history, rather than the people who navigated and responded and were able to really build amazing, powerful peoples, out of that history. So I think it's a really great representation of that.
And I like that. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I like this idea of turning victimization on its head, right? And telling all sides of the story, all sides. Rayka, Shaandiin, and Pimm, can you talk and speak about your collaboration on this story, knowing that the ceremony, like other cultural practices, is sacred? We talked a lot about how we now live in a time where nothing is private, nothing is sacred, not even having the right to keep information to yourself. And so when I saw the end of the film, I was like, oh, we don't get to see it. And how it felt, for how you thought your audience would respond to that as well. But this idea of sacred practices and respecting that as well.
I can just jump in really quick. One of the people on the project who is not Native, I was not in tune with that from the get-go. So it really was a learning experience for me to kind of take the lead from Shaandiin and really Pimm, who is the tone setter here, because we are talking about a film that really is a positive representation of an Indigenous family doing the work for future generations in a very, positive and empowering way moving forward. Pimm really was the leader in that sense. So we kind of responded to her throughout that process. But I'll let them, talk about the rest of it.
Yeah, I think for myself, documentaries and film in general has its origins in places that aren't necessarily the best. When it comes to marginalized people, I feel like there's always been a very unfair representation of who we are and where we come from and why. And I feel like documentaries especially really view marginalized people and things that are a bit foreign to them as as otherworldly, as like ethnographic, very like logistical responses to like how people live. And I feel like for myself, like just growing up, like I was like always told to like never film things that are like important to you in terms of like ceremony. And like I mean, I didn't necessarily grow up traditional, but I knew that like there was a practice to like how you go about things that are very personal to you. And so for us, it was like also like Ati's story is like nobody's gonna understand like what a ceremony is by seeing it. And for someone who like understands what it means to be like native in the modern day, it means to love, like to be surrounded by people that support you, and to like grow with each other. And I think like those things make you understand ceremony than actually like seeing the ceremony yourself. And so like it's like people always want to I guess like romanticize like this other side of thing of like something that they don't know. And it's like, no, you have that like right in front of you. You have like your family, you have like this love and support. And it's like right there. And you just like need to see that this is like the foundation of like where a ceremony is and like where it comes from. It's not necessarily this like foreign thing that you like have to understand in order to like understand a people's, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So I have to close my door because there's a truck outside. My apologies. Sorry about that. I hope that helps. I think that the part that I would really highlight are two things. One was that Shaandiin and Rayka both were willing to take this journey, and I definitely was probably a mama bear during the process. I really wanted to make sure that we protected certain parts of the ceremony because even like some of the language in the contract I'll mention talked about, and it wasn't anything that they particularly wrote, but it's just sort of the standard language to say, you know, certain parts of it are owned or certain parts of it then become the property of. And as indigenous people, we understand that we don't own those things either. Those things belong to the spirit, to the creation. And so there was kind of this heavy burden I was feeling about how to do this in a way that respected those things and the teachings, but also recognize that there was something that we have to offer. And so how do we work together to make that happen? And I really credit Rayka and Shaandiin for sitting down with not just me, but with a group of 20 of us or so of all ages and having that discussion about what it meant to them and kind of finding a way forward with it. And it really was our daughter, Ati. We had sat down with as a family with her and watched the other film, Period, End of Sentence. And she was the one when we were like, do you want to do this? This is a really private time, you know, a 12, 13-year-old wanting to tell basically the world about their period. You know, is this, are you up for this? And she, after watching that film, shared that if it made a difference for any other young people, because she, when watching that film, she realized how very different her experience already was faced with other young people in the world. And she said, if it helps even just one young person, then I think we should do this, Mom. And I really think, you know, it was the leadership of the young people in the film who really guided the work, who guided our working together. And I also think there was the power of having, there were definitely men involved, but the power of having women involved in trying to understand this very personal thing and finding a way to share it. I think that that's the other thing that we could all relate to just as women in this experience, and understanding how important it was to share that. Every person who was involved ended up telling their story just to each other and sharing parts of their story about their menstruation and how it impacted them and different stories. And I find that happens no matter where we share the film. Women of all ages, people of all ages come up and want to share their story with you, because I don't think in this world we've created a space to share that story. And it's such an important transition time, puberty, for all young people. You know, we only really have that transition at birth, puberty, middle age, and death. Those are big transition points, and we often don't recognize the emotional impact, the toll, the celebration, all the feelings and emotions we have about those times. We don't ever take time to stop and recognize that. And so I think this film helped to do that. And again, it was really a collaboration. I told Rayka and Shaandiin, they're about half my age. Combined, they might make my age. So I kept letting them know, like, I promise it's going to be okay. It's going to be, we're going to get through this, you know, because it was emotional at times. But I think I'm proud of them as an older person too, to see the change that they have as filmmakers. And I think it impacts all the films they'll do in the future as well. Thinking about how they worked with us in this film.
I love that it said we, the audience, weren't entitled to that. And that's it. So for me, it was just perfect. You don't get that. Keep it moving. Like you, and it was just absolutely right. You know, people are entitled to their ceremonies in secret, and you don't get to have it. You just don't get to have it. So I was really excited when it stopped. I was like, oh, okay. And I think it's a good lesson for women as well. You don't have to give up everything. You're under no obligation to do those things. And maybe because of my legal background, you know, I'm always like, ask for a lawyer first. And I hear so much information that people give. And I'm like, wow, because people feel like they're required, there's an obligation. So I really enjoyed it. I'm going to invite everyone here to join the National Social Impact Campaign for this film. So those who want to get access to the film, the screening toolkit, and support the impact to host their own film screening and event, we will put a link in there for you all to get to host a viewing of this film and have these discussions. We provide resources so that you can talk about these issues as well. So in the audience, if you can think of, if you belong to an organization, a service organization, you have a living room and you want to call people in, but we really think it's important that this film gets screened and that people have discussions around this. I'm sorry that I'm falling a little behind, so I'm going to go into Dr. Riesling Baldy. What information specific to the correct tribe would be helpful for the audience to kind of understand some of the things that happened in the film?
I mean, I think it's just encouraging people to learn more if they can about the Karuk peoples, the places that they come from very far Northern California and also the Southern Oregon region. And really thinking about it as Karuks, as living peoples of today, and some of the issues that they continue to face. And I think what you see here is a really strong example of a family that is really grounding their youth in culture and history and ceremony. That hasn't always been a possibility or the case for many of the peoples in our region. And to see that revitalization and that resurgence become such an important part of what we want to do, I think it also ties us to politically the continued things that we have to navigate through to make that happen. With Karuk especially, land use and the access to land and land like resources is very important, especially under ceremonial practices. It is the case throughout California that many California Native tribes don't have access to ceremonial sites, that they are actually under control of the state or federal government. And this can often mean that when we want to do ceremonies, it's very difficult to get access to them. In some cases, it kind of depends on your region. We have had examples of women's coming of age ceremonies that have been disrupted, interrupted, that they've attempted to stop, even to this day, because of where the land is located. So learning about Karuk is important because Karuk actually is rebuilding their access to and their ability to navigate their own lands because of what happened during the gold rush with dispossession. The Karuk continue to also lead the way in things like climate action and climate justice. They continue to lead the way in how we approach research and working with communities. They are some of the people who are trying to really push for Indigenous women to become re-involved with fire and fire management. Karuk is leading the way in how Indigenous women should be at the forefront of what we're talking about when we're talking about building climate resiliency and why that is the case. And you can see that through this ceremony, the importance of her understanding her connection to land and climate and the future and the more than human relatives that surround her in the ceremony, the water, the trees, the mountains, right? Learning about Karuk will be important as you start to explore this. I don't ever want to forget that they are land-based peoples. I also think that they lived through such an attempt at their destruction that they're coming out the other side of that is such an important story to tell. My own great-grandfather, he was a Karuk man. He really wrote about how the Karuk received some of the worst treatment during the gold rush by the miners. And they talk about the violence that came into Karuk territory because of miners trying to get at land, gold, and resources. And he says in one of his writings, he says, we had the worst treatment by the people, and our history is full of this violence but there's not a lot of documentation of us, of our voices and our ways of doing things and our way of navigating that. He's like, they didn't leave behind the records of the Karuk people. They left behind the records of the other peoples. And it's our job now to tell our own stories. That's why I think work like this is so important. It's Karuk people saying that they are willing to now share and tell their own stories to be able to correct that historical record.
Thank you. I'm going to follow up with another question, Dr. About your participation. You've participated over the years, and you're also in these ceremonies, and you're also the author of We Are Dancing for You, Native Feminism and Revitalization of Women's Coming of Age Ceremonies. Can you just share very quickly your experience as an aunt and a mother in these ceremonies?
Sure. I was actually very fortunate enough to see in my own lifetime the resurgence of these ceremonies. I love when you see Pimm and the other women talking about, like, we didn't have them when we were younger, and we grow up and then we get to live through this moment of resurgence. So being able to see that in Karuk territory, in my own area of Hoopa territory, in Ihuk territory, in Wiyot territory, in Talowa territory, and to see as all of those things came together, I also was able to participate in a lot of those resurgences as a community member or an auntie or a friend. It's a really, what I tell people is there is so much joy that goes into ceremony that when you sometimes think about Native people, you don't know that, one, we're like the most hilarious people you'll ever meet in your entire life. We're probably the funniest people I have ever seen ever, and I've been all over the place now. I always tell people, like, you want to hear the funniest, like, dirtiest jokes you've ever heard, like, go hang out with old Indian ladies. And they will just like joke all the time. And Vine Deloria Jr. actually talks about how Native humor gets stripped away from us as in the public imagination. They can't imagine us as full of joy and full of happiness and just the ability to just laugh and care for each other and love. Instead, we get turned into kind of these like stoic historical moments. And I just think the ceremonies bring out so much joy for us, and so much laughter. I then had the opportunity now last summer where we had a flower dance for my daughter. And this is the first time that I actually was doing the flower dance as a mother instead of like as a community member or as an auntie. It's very different. I will tell you, I wrote the book about the resurgence of women's coming of age ceremonies in Native California just about 5 years ago now. Before I had done it as a mom, I might write it a little bit differently now because of what I know is like coming through and happening to these young women as a mother. And I recognize a lot of the opportunities that my daughter had to demonstrate for herself, that the strength that she needed to navigate life, she already had. She just needed an opportunity to demonstrate in a safe space that she could do those things. And she didn't just always have to sort of rely on other people. And I watched a tremendous amount of growth happen in her in a very short period of time. And then I continue to see it to this day. It's been just about a year. And I will tell you, like, I can't express just how much you watched this very significant change happen. And she refers back now to her dance a lot when she's thinking about in her own life what she wants to do. And she says, like, well, I already did that for my dance. I know I can do this now. I already tried that in my dance. I know I can try this now. And I will also say, much like the other girls did for her, I think they continue to inspire the next generation of girls to get excited about their dances. And I think it helped me to understand that as a mom, we get very mixed messages about what it means to be the mother to a daughter, especially in this contemporary society and culture. I told people what I learned from this dance, I learned it very physically, was learning how to allow myself to be the mother that she needed, and not the mother that I thought I was expected to be. And so learning how to be her mother in this process, I think, was really important. And especially as she was moving into different phases of her life, I needed to be able to both let go, but also understand there's always expectations of women and how they're supposed to be, how they're supposed to act, even as moms. And for me to be able to say, I need to be her mom for her, not a mom that is sort of with all the expectations.
Awesome. Wow. 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 Yeah. Wow. I just wish we had more time. Shaandiin, I'm going to ask you, as a member of the Nene tribe who also have their own coming of age ceremony, can you quickly share with us how this connected you to the Karuk tribe in the making of this film?
Actually is after reading Dr. Kutcha's book that I like realized like the very like the similarities between the Kinalda and like some of the ceremonies that happen up north. And I feel like there's a lot of similarities in like the days in like the origin stories and like where things come from. And I think like I didn't have that when I was younger. I didn't have like this like really big community and like familial love. I mean, I had the familial love, but not in like a traditional sense. And I feel like my experience came from a lot from my grandma. And so Navajo people are matrilineal, and like you get your clan from your mother. Like there's other like land like teachings, like lots of things like come from your mom and like your grandma and all of these things. And so things get passed down. But when I had my period and I was about to go through my ceremony, my grandma brought it up to me. But at that point, we had never practiced anything traditional. And I feel like it felt like very foreign to me. And my grandma was really excited. And we've talked about it recently, but it just like seemed like such a hard time for us to like understand necessarily what we were going through. My grandma went to boarding school and was told not to speak her language, came out like very Christianized. And like a lot of like my dad came from a family that was very similar. And so like we didn't pass on these things. And I feel like there has been a resurgence of like wanting to understand, wanting to go through these traditions and like understand like where you're at and like kind of like how history has not been on our side for Native peoples, and how there's like such a huge adaptation that we have to go through in order to like have this access to knowledge and like have this access to like understanding like where you come from. But I think like lots of people are doing the work now to like undo the things that have happened to us. And so I mean, like I came at it with the perspective of not being able to go through my ceremony, and it felt very emotional for that reason on a lot of sides. And it felt like emotional in like just seeing like a family taking care of knowledge and like spreading that onto like youth and other people, and constantly inviting people and lending out a hand, and just having like a big welcome for like anybody that was like wanting to learn. And so I mean, since then, like have done a lot of stuff like around my community, and like have seen like my niece go through her ceremony and like have taken part in that. And it's just been like such a beautiful experience to like reframe like how I see these things from like my own culture, and like how I guess like how specificity is important too in stories, and like how the specificity of the Karuk people and their ceremony can like give life to a Dene woman from like a completely different place. But I think that's like the power of tradition, of like film, of all of these things. Like you can spread knowledge and like tell stories, and they can have specificity, and you can like take that and use it for like your own life too.
I love that. Rayka, can you please share a bit about your background and how you connected with the Karuk tribe in making this film?
Well, I think for me, one of the biggest sort of like learning lessons and takeaways was just realizing like the power of community, and looking at Pimm and her community and saying, wow, that is a major lack in my life. That is like looking inward and saying like, I felt so deeply emotional being around that, because of just how beautiful it was to have all of this support and to have this like reciprocity, like just, you know, constantly giving back and thinking of everything in terms of the we as opposed to the I. And so for me, it's like I'm a first generation Iranian immigrant, and, you know, my parents basically left the country like many people in the diaspora, just to, you know, sort of rid themselves of the oppression that they were dealing with. And so there's a lot of like culture that was, you know, lost, and my family really trying to, you know, teach us Farsi, the language, so that we can, you know, maintain a connection to our culture while growing up in Southern California. and I'm thankful that there is an Iranian community here. But it's interesting, like after this experience of making this film and kind of like observing, you know, Pimm, how she shows up in her community, I took that and like absorbed it like a sponge and hope to, you know, like hope to somehow, you know, bring that back into my own life. And so the year and a half or something since we've made the film, I have been like a lot more proactive in my community and like connecting with some of the older people in my community and like learning their stories and trying to be proud of being Iranian and like, you know, learning some of those traditions, because for a long time I was embarrassed because it was so much about just like fitting in and people pleasing and, you know, being just shy to embrace your culture. So you know, it's like it's so much bigger than like how it began. You know, in my mind it was like a story about menstruation, but it's not that. It's that and so much more. You know, it's about community, it's about like showing up with intention and purpose, and like how you can always be thinking about giving to something, giving back to a group.
There you go, Pimm. That she's from a long line of ladies and won't be the last. It's beautiful to see it in action. I am going to, before we get to our last question, I'm going to ask everyone to join the call to action, join the PAD project in supporting the Native Cultures Fund Long Line of Ladies projects. Get your wallets out, get your debit cards out, check for it in the chat, a link in the chat to learn more, to donate, or you can text 71777 for more details. Please participate. Please do this thing. Some of us spend $30 on coffee for 2 days. Put that $30 with you. That's you, right? Put that $30 to work 1 week. I'm going to go to the end because I think this is for our audience, for me, visions for the future. And these are questions for everyone to answer if you feel so moved. But what do you want Indigenous communities to learn from this film? And how can non-Indigenous people be actionable allies in the efforts towards cultural revitalization and land back? So if you are thinking about, you know, answer 1 or answer 2, but I guess starting with, what do we want Indigenous communities to learn from this film? Dr. Riesling-Baldy, you want to go first? Told y'all I'd start calling on people.
Yeah, I'm good to do that. I mean, I think we always want to make sure that people carry on the messaging of that we are still here, but really in a very meaningful way that demonstrates that we're not only still here, we're very active and very invested in how we can build better futures, not just for like our own peoples, but for all of our youth and young people. I also hope that people will see a really important understanding of the ways in which our families and our cultures can help to inform good, strong Indigenous youth. I think for a long time, those types of approaches to education, types of approaches to how we understand our place in this world have really been taught outside of us, and have really pushed away the ability of us to bring our culture and our backgrounds, our perspectives, and our families into what we're learning in educational systems, in our higher education like pursuits. And instead of saying you have to let those things go, it's more, these are actually an active part of what's going to make you able to approach some of the greatest things of our time that we want to see changed or developed. And the other thing I'd like them to get out of it is like, you can tell a story about the places that you come from and the people you come from, and then people are going to want to watch it and read it and listen to it and engage with it. One of the things that came out of the work that we've done is the young people that come up and say to me constantly when I tell them, like, I'm going to talk about this film again, or I'm going to go talk about this book, or they're like, people want to know about us. Like, they want to know who we are. And I said, yes. And that's important to them because oftentimes in our own spaces, all we see are really negative stories about our peoples and our places and our histories. we can tell our stories, we can use our voices. And if any young person is out there thinking like, I also want to make a movie, make a movie. If they want to write a book, write a book. Like, be the storytellers. It's so important that you can be the people that make these things happen.
Anybody else? Does anybody want to tackle how can non-Indigenous people be actionable allies in the effort towards cultural revitalization and land back? Because that's important. That's important for us to know.
I was gonna talk
No.
about
Do it.
another question, like also reference
I'm sorry.
what you just asked, but yeah, I mean, I think one like big takeaway is just that there's like so many stories to tell. There's so many different perspectives out there, and this is like just one of them. And I feel like to be able to share in like resilience, in like ways that you're like kind of like fighting back from like this narrative that has been constructed not by your people, and like how can you like reframe like what your perspective is and like elevate that and uplift that, because there's so many just like I guess like media has done like a really has had a really awful role in like how people view themselves, including myself, like talking about like embarrassment and like embarrassment of like where you come from. Like I feel like that was me when I was younger, was like feeling bad about not being this thing that was like the ideal. And I feel like they're like for instance, like Ati like loves herself so much, and it's like really cool to see that like from youth. And I think like just continuing to do that and like sharing these stories with each other, like really showing like how you can like share positivity like with each other in Indigenous communities. And I think that also goes to like say like how can allyship help like spreading these stories of like love and perspective. And also like this isn't just like the only case. Like I feel like there's a spectrum of stories out there that like have not been told yet. And so I feel like supporting artists, supporting youth, supporting people who don't get the chance to like go to film school or like go like a traditional route of like how you're able to like have access to these tools. I feel like there's like so many different ways that like people can like contribute to like the love and like knowledge and like sharing of different perspectives. And I think that in itself just like makes the world a better place.
Okay, any instruction how we non-Indigenous people can be actionable allies? Give folks something to do.
Katja, you know that's your question, right? Katja's always telling all of us. She's really good at it. Katja is younger than me as well. And when she's a professor at a Cal Poly Humboldt, and I worked there for a time being too. And I talk about things in a certain way, and then she would come into the room and say, "Give the land back," and I'd be like, "That's not how we do it." But I've really come to like respect and own that like we do just have to say things, we have to manifest them. I think my generation manifested a little bit differently, and I'm excited for people like Katja and others to manifest it in a different way. So I'm gonna say she should answer that.
I mean, I think the best kind of allyship is through action, the ways that you actually do things that manifest in some kind of difference being made. I always say to people, actions are very important because I think it helps us to demonstrate that we're not always in the phase of just thinking about it, but we're going to try to do what we can. People always say, well, what can I do? I always say, start by looking up the organizations in places that are where you are at, that are Indigenous focused or Indigenous run, especially tribes. Oftentimes tribes will have things like honor taxes or ways that you can donate to their programs and projects and things that they want to do. So will tribal organizations. And sometimes people will say, well, I don't have very much money. But I always say to people, on those times when we call attention to, here's this organization that's doing this amazing work, everybody give to this organization right now. It's not just about the money. It's to see as a small tribal or Indigenous organization, the work that you're doing being supported through dollar donations from a group of people at a singular time. If you get 20 people giving a donation, it just makes you think like people care, people want to help, people want to show support, and it gives you that push you might need into the next part of the thing that you're trying to do. I will say land back is a huge effort. And if you haven't started the process of learning about land back, you can just Google it on YouTube, start watching a bunch of videos, learn about what that means. If you know people who have land, if you know people who are talking about land in a way of like around preservation, conservation, the first question should always be, how have we looked at giving this land back to an indigenous tribe, indigenous organization, indigenous land trust? It should always be first and foremost on your mind, how are we centering and putting indigenous peoples at the forefront of what we're doing in any organization that you work for. It's not, it's a thing that has been left out of the conversation. And the last thing I'll say is be the first person to say out loud, like, why don't we just give that back? And that can be land, that can be baskets, that can be items from a museum, that can be art, that can be the first person to just raise your hand and be like, hey, are we just not going to give that back? I don't know why we're trying to make a plan to keep it. And I will tell you, I have an answer for every question you have now, where you're like, but if we do, I have an answer for every question. But I will tell you, it's far more powerful to do that kind of action related work for yourself, for your community, and for the people who have had to do this for 150, 250 years with very little support. We have been moving forward in all the ways that we can. It just helps us to continue.
I want to stop and just give a special acknowledgement to two of our illustrious impact campaign advisors who are on the Zoom, Jordan Marie Whetstone of Rising Hearts and Ava Marie Carney of the Poet Society. Thank you so much for joining us and really helping us get these resources together that people will use while viewing and sharing this film. Any closing thoughts? I mean, I've tried not to talk too much, but I get so, you guys remember when you got the award, I got all emotional because it really has me constantly thinking about myself. And, you know, again, here we are in a space where we need to heal from the the stigmatization of having a period and all the negative stuff that we've learned about having a period. And then you get to the next stage of life. So you learn all this negative stuff about what you become when you get a period. And then there's more negative stuff when you lose the period. And so what happens in that space in between, I just am like, this is just a beautiful place to say that there can be healing and that there can be ownership, and your moon time is beautiful. It's fly because you are. And so that's why I get so excited about this, because I'm like, oh, it checks off two boxes. It corrects a lie about our bodies and who we are and how we're connected to the universe and the value of our indigenous communities and teaching us these things. So thank you again. Any final thoughts? If there are any questions, does anyone have any questions in the chat before we move to final thoughts? Because I will talk and I'll be rapping to you guys all night. And it's just been, you know, I almost want to see you leave. Are there any questions in the chat that we want to present? If anybody very quickly wants to talk about the role of men, which was also very interesting.
I'll just mention that wasn't, I think that was a beautiful part of the film that came out that we didn't plan for. I don't think that we like storyboard, we didn't really storyboard, but we didn't really storyboard for that, but just something that was reflected as they were filming the family and the community was the role of men that they have, the real balance that we see in our community up here in Northwestern California between men's roles and women's roles in supporting one another. And I really appreciated that came out in the film. And it's been one of the things that's been commented a lot. And I think it's important because we have brought our ceremonies back for our young women, but that we still are working on figuring out how to support always all of our young men. That's another hard transition time for them. And so this has been a way for young men involved to understand that time, but we're working on that. I think as a community, that's one of the things that we all have in front of us, that, you know, the women's part was almost easy. And for young men of color, young indigenous men, you know, how do we create that for them as well?
I also wanted to add, there was a great story that was told to me by one of the people I interviewed, in which they were saying that at a point when they were talking about this dance and like these dances and somebody had asked the question of one of our elders, a man, that had said, well, what are, if like, are men involved in this ceremony? Like, what do men do? Are men a part of this? And his response was, why wouldn't they be? Like, and he was like, why wouldn't they be a really active part of this? And they're like, well, you know, because it's about like periods, or it's about like menstruation. And they were like, not like, we didn't think like that. And I loved that kind of way of like, why wouldn't they be an active part of this young girl's life, of this ceremony, of this discussion? Why wouldn't they know about what she's going through? Why wouldn't they know in general about like what women are, like what happens to women, what goes on with women with periods? Like, he just couldn't he was like, why wouldn't we be there? Why wouldn't we be doing things? And I think it pushes back against the narrative that somehow menstruation is a singularly women's issue, and that it belongs only in a discussion with women or with like femme presenting peoples. And I think we have to always be pushing ourselves to say that that's like a Western patriarchal perspective on what that means, and to say, of course they would be there. Of course they would be an active part of it.
I also want everyone, fingers crossed, send up prayers. Long Line of Ladies is nominated for a News and Documentary Emmy Award for Outstanding Cinematography in Documentaries. So winners will be announced tonight. We will know. Luck, congratulations. I am claiming that today before it happens. Congratulations. Not only is your film being acknowledged for the information and all of the things, that the impact that it's already having, but that it's also been nominated. So congratulations on that. And thank you everyone who participated today. Please share this information. Please go on, make donations as our call of action. Please screen this film. The resources are available. Just reach out. It really is important that people hear this story and understand. Please also, please make sure you fill out our closing poll. To all of the panelists, thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for, as I call it, playing full out today.